Half a day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you who have joined us before, you know the drill. So please practice those fingers and check out our site, the Zoom site, as many of you are familiar with by now. And look for the chat and log in and note who's in the house. So at least our presenters will know who are on board, and say hello and good morning. So thank you for joining us. I'm Cynthia Cabot with the Guam Coalition Against Sexual Assaults and Family Violence. And we want to thank you again for those of you who have joined us with our prior webinars, and for those of you joining us for the first time, half a day, and welcome. This is our No More webinar series, Mañaina, our elders, our communities of strength in addressing elder abuse. Today, of course, is day one. First of all, just want to say thank you to our funders, because if not for them, we would not be able to have the technical assistance, support, and guidance to be able to provide this webinar. And that's with funding through the Office on Violence Against Women, as well as Family Violence Prevention and Services Act. So we want to thank them profusely for being able to support us with our training efforts. Here's a brief look into our agenda today. Yes, we will be primarily focusing on understanding elder abuse, and I'll briefly introduce our presenters for this morning shortly. But we are running from this morning until 11 o'clock, and we'll factor in a 10-minute break in between so we can go grab our beverages. So meanwhile, as I do this intro piece, if you haven't already, go grab your favorite beverage and get comfy in your seat in front of your device for this morning's session. So just want to also point out as a reminder to you folks, if you're interested in downloading the webinar materials, it's available on our website, www.guamcoalition.org. If it's the first time logging in, look for that blue button at the top corner of our homepage. Log in with the word elders and the password, which is all caps, EAA 2021. And when you go into that site, you'll be able to access the information, download the slides that we have also that's available as handouts, and the agenda as well. For those of you who are interested in accessing continuing education units, we are able, thanks to the University of Guam, to offer that in partnership with them. For the 10 contact hours, meaning you have to attend all 4 days, and they don't allow you being able to watch the recording afterwards if you should miss a day. You will need to contact them directly, email them, note the subject, and of course that cost is yours. So we invite you to be able to access the CEUs if you're interested. We also want to invite you to join us tomorrow. We will continue on with this, and we have our guest from the Department of Parks and Recreation, Tony Malia Ramirez. So just wanted to point out, she certainly corrected me when we started to talk and make reference to our elders as our Manamko. She corrected me by saying it should be Mañaina. So tune in tomorrow and find out more about our Chamorro language. So we certainly appreciate your feedback. Please complete our evaluation. And after today's session, you will be sent a gentle reminder from Zoom, of course, with my name on it, to please complete the evaluation. We ask that you do so because your feedback is important to us. And for those of you accessing our CEUs, we use that as a guide also. It's almost like your test. So please complete one for every day, especially for those who are accessing CEUs with the University of Guam. Just wanted to point out too that in mid-June, June 16, 17, 23, and 24, we have another round of webinars coming, and that's advocacy and services addressing our LGBTQ+ community. So check out our website if you want more information, or email us, and that is info@guamcoalition.org. So now we come to today's presenters. We certainly appreciate the collaboration and partnership with the United States Office of the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we have with us Assistant U.S. Attorney Benjamin Petersburg. Ben is actually with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the districts of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. And his duties include prosecuting white-collar crime and fraud, and acting as the Elder Justice Coordinator for the U.S. Attorney's Office here on Guam and the CNMI. He is a graduate of the University of Iowa College of Law, and he has lived and worked in the Marianas since 2010. Although he's tuning in from Iowa, we thank you for joining us again to be able to provide this presentation with us for us today. Also joining us is Jamie Cavett. She is a special agent with the FBI and is assigned to the Guam FBI Resident Agency. She began her career in Muskogee, Oklahoma, where she investigated different violations to include fraud. Most recently, she transferred to Guam from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where she investigated violent crime matters to include Hobbs Act and Indian country matters. Prior to joining the FBI, she was a police officer in Kansas. So please join me in welcoming Ben Petersburg and Jamie Cavett for today's presentation. Thank you, folks.
All right. Well, Hafaday and good morning, and thank you, Cynthia, for that introduction. I know I'm still looking at Cynthia's screen, and this is my first Zoom presentation, so I'm hopefully we can get back over to me.
Okay, you can start your screen now.
All right. How's that?
Perfect.
Great. Well, good morning again, everyone. And as Cynthia said, my name is Ben Petersburg. I am an AUSA with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the districts of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. Also present is Jamie Cavett. Jamie, did you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
You're in mute. There you go.
There we go. Hello. Thank you guys very much for joining in today. Hopefully Ben and I can present some very educational and informative information for you guys to take with you and move forward with. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate this.
All right. Well, we are here to talk about a very important subject in elder abuse, and quite a bit of material to go over. So we move quickly at times, but I do want to encourage everyone to put your questions in the chat box so that we can get those addressed. We'd always like to, make sure we're talking about the things that you want to hear about. All right, and with that, we'll talk a little bit about who we are and what we do, and then get into what is elder abuse, what are some of the different forms that it takes, what we can do to help try to prevent elder abuse, and what actions people can take when elder abuse has already occurred. So I am from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and a couple of fun facts to know and tell. There are 94 judicial districts nationwide, and in general, there is one U.S. attorney per district. We are the only office in the country that covers two separate districts, both Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. So part of the reason we are here today is the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act of 2017, which Congress passed with the purpose to help try and prevent elder abuse and exploitation, and to improve the justice system's response to victims in elder abuse and exploitation cases. And some of the ways that happens, one of the things that that statute did was create one of the positions that I occupy as the Elder Justice Coordinator. And what we do, there's an Elder Justice Coordinator in every district in the US. And we're responsible for prosecuting and assisting in the prosecution of elder abuse cases, that at least the ones that constitute violations of federal law, as well as conducting public outreach and awareness activities relating to elder abuse. And that's one of the reasons we're here this morning. So after that statute was enacted, the Department of Justice created the Elder Justice Initiative, which has several different missions, including, as you can see on the slide, building local, state, and federal capacity to fight elder abuse, promoting justice for older Americans, and helping older victims and their family. And if you do want more information on the Elder Justice Initiative, that can be found at www.justice.gov/elderjustice. And that link will be included with a number of other helpful links at the end of the presentation. So we've got a little quote here from a former US Attorney General, William Barr. In 2019, he established the Transnational Elder Fraud Strike Force, and said, fraud against the elderly is on the rise. One of the most significant and pernicious causes for this increase is foreign-based fraud schemes. And the new Transnational Elder Fraud Strike Force will bring together the expertise and resources of our prosecutors, federal and international law enforcement partners, and other government agencies to better target, investigate, and prosecute criminals abroad who prey on our elderly at home. And the DOJ is committed to ending the victimization of elders across the country. So the Elder Justice Initiative focuses largely on financial schemes and scams, abuse cases, and neglect cases, because those are the sorts of cases that fall under federal jurisdiction. And the types of crimes that, based on available evidence, are directly targeting or predominantly affecting elders, which are classified as individuals age 60 or older. And predominantly affected means a majority of the victims are elders or were elders. Within the Elder Justice Initiative, we see three main types of federal prosecutions, and those are large-scale scams and frauds, position of trust exploitation with large loss amounts involving wire or mail fraud, and elder neglect or abuse in the healthcare setting involving misuse of federal funds, which are often Medicare and or Medicaid funds. This act also does assign some tasks to the FBI. Jamie, do you want to chime in on a few of those that are here on the screen?
Sure. So the FBI has also has representatives located throughout the nation with all FBI offices that are specific to address elder abuse and the prosecution of those cases. So you'll see as we continue through the presentation today that the FBI takes an active role in a lot of the fraud cases and the financial abuse that you'll see with elders. So it began with training FBI agents to.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. To train FBI agents to successfully prosecute those types of cases that are financial. And what you will see also is that elders are victims for many reasons, but one is because of sometimes their cognitive capabilities, and then also their lack of understanding of technology. So we will find that they are targeted because of those factors. And sometimes they're targeted from people outside of the United States, which is also helpful for FBI agents to receive the training necessary to prosecute or to investigate those cases to present for prosecution.
Thanks, Jamie. Here we've got a short video to share. This is going to be sort of a general introduction to various forms of elder abuse. So I'm going to play that for you, and we will join you afterwards.
She had a pressure ulcer on her back, which when measured was about 11 by 13 inches, and you could actually see her spine.
He kept hitting me and hitting me and hitting me. And he said, I'm going to finish you off.
She would come around, she would knock on the door. And after my insistence of him not answering the door, she started to knock on the windows.
I didn't like that at all.
What she started to do was slowly consolidate her aunt's financial accounts, and she also had her aunt sign a quitclaim deed. And that was done several months after Miss King was diagnosed with dementia.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of different ways for an older adult to become abused. Emotional abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, neglect. Sexual assault certainly happens in older adults. Oftentimes, people who are abused in one way are actually abused in other ways as well.
1 in 10 individuals over the age of 60 are abused, yet only 1 in 25 report it.
So the issues of fear of intimidation and embarrassment, I think, are very common.
Not only is this a current problem, but it's become significantly enhanced with the increase in population. Then we have an obligation and responsibility to equip our officers with the proper tools of investigation and preservation of evidence.
What the patrol officers do when they respond to these scenes is absolutely critical in my final investigation. When they're there, they can ask questions of an investigative nature that I may not be able to ask later on.
Where there's a potential victim and a potential suspect in a house, we always separate them.
Bill, can I have you step back here, please, and talk to me for a minute? Just real quick.
So the victim and the suspect can't hear each other.
Talking to the older adult privately and asking, is anybody hurting you? Are you afraid of anybody? Is anybody using your money without your permission?
Has he hurt you before?
Dig deeper, try to look for inconsistencies with what the victim could be saying.
A lot of times victims will lie to officers just to protect themselves from further abuse.
Use patience and understanding. The victim may be more willing to describe what's going on if you're patient with them and just are sympathetic and understanding.
Just because somebody has a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or some other dementia doesn't mean we can't interview them and talk to them, but it does mean we want to pick the times. So for example, there's something called sundowning syndrome, where people with dementia get more confused later in the day.
Keep the questions very simple, very direct. If you need a time frame when something happened, give them anchors like what was on TV at the time. Was it light out? Was it dark out? Was it springtime? Was it summer? Was it winter? Was it bingo day?
One of the most important things is documentation of everything. Everything from smell to sight to, is there food in the house? Is there a place for someone to go to the bathroom, to wash, to brush their teeth?
Look at the evidence. What does the evidence tell you about what might be going on in the home? Talk to the neighbors. Look for other signs of violence in the home.
When you do see some evidence of bruising, asking if you can look at arms, legs, torso, whatever the person will allow you to see is very important because, as we know, bruises fade over time. Bruising that is on the head, neck, soles of the feet, buttocks, torso are highly suspicious related to possible abuse.
This is now my house.
If a suspected abuser hands you a durable power of attorney, don't assume that that means that there isn't a crime going on. A power of attorney is a document that authorizes somebody to act on someone else's behalf. And so legal ability to touch or move or negotiate funds is not the same as a blank check to steal those funds.
We're finding across the country more and more multidisciplinary teams forming so that when that frontline person has a concern, they have a place to go where they have a reliable mechanism where people with expertise in social services, medical care, prosecution, guardian, all those different groups can come together and help figure out what's going on and what needs to be done to protect this person.
We collaborate early. We talk about what to put in a search warrant. We talk about what photographs to take. We have these conversations because we're always sort of thinking to the end of the case.
These interviews and investigations have to be coordinated in such a way that they flow and give reassurance and confidence to the victim. They've just left a chaotic situation. What they don't need is a chaotic investigation.
Having an advocate with me was invaluable because it showed the victim at that time that that police weren't just there to investigate the crime, but the police were there to make sure that they were safe.
Adult Protective Services is in every state. Law enforcement should know who the caseworkers are on their local level.
They have information, they have resources, and frankly, they're really good at talking to these victims. A lot of times they're people that they trust.
And I appreciate what the social workers bring, and the social workers here appreciate what we bring a lot more, and the trust level has gone through the roof.
When a patrol officer goes into a situation where an older adult is there, and that older adult might be just sitting in the corner, not responsive, realize that's not normal aging. That's not what should be happening. To see if they're able to interact with you or if they seem withdrawn and afraid, that's a wonderful position that only a patrol officer might be able to really suss out for somebody.
Police officers in general have a pretty good intuition of when things aren't right.
See what's going on, what's bothering them, ask those simple questions that can potentially make a huge difference.
You're not going to catch everything, but in the same token, just put a little bit effort forth, a little bit more, and might come out with something big.
All right, so I think part of what we can take away from that video is that elder abuse can take on sort of different modes. You can see examples of physical abuse, psychological abuse, as well as financial abuse, which is sort of the area that I think we'll focus on in our presentation this morning. But you can also see the different roles there are for, in that video in particular, investigators after the fact dealing with physical abuse or other forms of elder abuse. But our presentation, we hope to provide some information that will be useful for even friends, family, advocates, and our Manamco and senior citizens themselves to recognize and identify forms of financial abuse in particular, and ways to hopefully try and prevent it. So I'm going to move on here. And we're going to move into a section, this is titled, What is Elder Financial Abuse? And we're going to look at a number of different forms that elder financial abuse can take, and hopefully give you some useful examples here. And in our first slide, we've got sort of a great big list, and you can see that financial exploitation or financial abuse takes many, many different forms. Some you may recognize and be familiar with, some may be a little newer. And some of the common ones that you might read about in the news are things like internet fraud and theft and identity theft that target senior citizens in particular. And we've got another short video here that'll be sort of an introduction to ways that senior citizens are targeted with dealing with financial exploitation.
One of the forms of abuse among aging adults is financial exploitation. Tonight at 5, we continue our series of stories breaking the silence, elder abuse awareness.
Financial exploitation is costing older Americans more than $35 billion each and every year, according to the Adult Protective Services Association. Well, WATE 6 on Your Side reporter Don Dare examines why some people fall victim to this crime.
The financial exploitation of older adults is often called the crime of the 21st century. In a national study, nearly 20% of those 65 and older indicated some form of financial mistreatment or criminal fraud. Sometimes, however, criminals are caught. Nearly 100 people once trusted Roger Williams with their savings. He's now a federal prisoner for breaking their trust.
I can't say.
Jimmy Vineyard had invested with Williams. Filled with emotion, he could hardly speak when we talked in July 2014.
Beautiful.
He and his wife, Ellen, she died in 2011, thought they had invested wisely after putting their money in investments operated solely by Williams. Showing us deposit slips, Mr. Vineyard had invested over $500,000 with Williams. But when he needed cash to pay for Ellen's care, Williams told him the money was gone.
Got all my life savings. Yes.
You can see it in his face, the rage building against Williams. Because Roger Williams was a preacher, investors trusted him with nearly $2 million. At his church in Gatlinburg, we asked him about his investors' savings.
Their money's gone, yeah.
Some 90 investors? How about the other investors?
Yeah, their money, yeah, that was all of our investment over the past 7 years.
I think it's illegal what he done. Very illegal.
Gerald and Judy Perkins, both retirees, lost their house to Roger Williams' Ponzi scheme. For several years, they received monthly checks from Williams, drawn on their investment, which paid the mortgage on their home. But the couple received devastating news in the summer of 2014. Williams sent a letter that he's going out of business, that all distributions will cease immediately.
It's our money. My husband worked for that, and it was his retirement.
We have no comments, Mr. Dare.
After an exhaustive investigation, Williams pleaded guilty last fall to mail fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of IRS laws. The government said he ran a Ponzi scheme, spending most of the money on himself.
Once they realize that they've been taken, it hurts your pride. Not only, have you lost your money, it hurts.
U.S. Postal Inspector Wendy Bowles and an IRS federal investigator spent several years gathering information and building their case against Williams. His clients, all older adults, trusted their financial advisor.
Yes, they did. A lot of these people considered him a friend. These Ponzi schemes, the investment schemes, it's high earnings. There's never ups and downs. Never.
Yeah.
I've never seen an up and down till it collapses.
The effects of financial exploitation on vulnerable adults are devastating. Loss of security and loss of trust in others. There's depression, fear, anger, and self-doubt. The financial profiteering commonly involves a trusted person.
But I hope to see him stop from this because he don't need to do anybody else.
Jimmy Vineyard died a broken man 2 years before Roger Williams had his day in court. Williams is no longer a free man. He's serving a 5-year sentence at a federal prison in Kentucky. If you feel that you or someone you know may have been or is at risk of being a victim of financial abuse, contact the Adult Protective Services. This toll-free number, 1-888-277-8366. Don Dare, WATE, 6 on Your Side.
So there we see a form of an investment scam, essentially. And that would be a scam that it looks like it was perpetrated in person by an individual who knew the victims personally and had access to them. But
one of the forms of abuse among aging.
But elder financial abuse can occur in a number of different ways. It can certainly take place through the mail. It can take place on the computer. It may involve email or social media. It can take place over the phone by scammers calling phone numbers and trying to impersonate a government agency or in another way. And of course, it can take place in person. So we're going to start with a look at ways that elder financial abuse takes place through the mail, and that can commonly involve a mass mailing and a mail scam. Uh, some of the very common ones that we see are things like lottery scams that claim you may have won the lottery, but the catch being you have to pay a fee before you can collect your winnings, or you have won a prize, which can be sort of a sweepstakes scam. You may receive a check, you have won money. It can take a number of different forms. In some cases, you might receive a mailer from a fake charity asking for money for donations. You can sometimes there are investment seminars and even things like psychic scams.
Hey, Ben, I think we can all attest to some of these, right, that are on that
Sure.
list. You know, especially you've won the lottery, or I've personally received those mailers and phone calls about winning the lottery.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that they're very common. I know they may be a little bit less common out here in the Marianas.
Okay.
We may not be on the same mailing lists or phone number lists as they get circulated in the mainland, but I do think they
Okay.
are very.
That's interesting you say that. I didn't think about it being mainland versus the island here, because in the mainland, it's almost daily that you get scam calls, phone calls, and especially mailers. I mean, you're on a mailing list from the minute you register to vote.
And I think some of the trouble is if you do respond to one of those phone calls or one of those mailers, it seems like the volume of
Yeah.
calls and mails just increases even more.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring up the point that just because we're talking about elderlies, I think that there's some takeaways even for our younger generation or everybody here on this, that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
I agree, absolutely. And I think we have a video here that deals with a lottery scam. If I can get this to play. Oh no, we've got a sweepstakes scam. All right.
Do you want to be a winner? Of course, we all want to be winners. That's why we enter sweepstakes. Hi, I'm Andrea Avery, United States Postal Inspector. Now, there are legitimate sweepstakes, but you never have to pay to play. That's a scam. And there's a new sweepstakes scam to look out for. Someone calls or writes to you saying you've won a cash prize in a sweepstakes, which, by the way, you never even entered. The cash is on its way to you in a metal briefcase secured with a combination lock. Here's the twist. You have to send money to get the combination, and you have to do it quickly because the sender tells you the briefcase will self-destruct in a short period of time. And with it, your winnings. So you send in the money and get the combination. Excitedly, you open the briefcase and... Remember, you don't have to pay to enter a sweepstakes or collect a prize. If you're asked to pay, stay away. The sweepstakes is a scam. To learn more about scams, visit uspis.gov.
So, Jamie, maybe you can help us out here. Could you describe sort of a common lottery scam that might take place using a mailer?
Well, I think we've all probably heard of the, oh, now I'm drawing a blank of what the name of it is, but the most common one. We see commercials about it.
Like Publishers Clearinghouse.
Yes, thank you. That's the word I'm
Sure.
thinking about, Publishers Clearinghouse. Well, what we have found is that although Publishers Clearinghouse may be legitimate, and in some situations it does work, but what you find is people start replicating and duplicating and fraudulently creating what appears to be the Publishers Clearinghouse, with just a little bit of twist where they will ask for taxes to be paid on the money prior to it being dispersed to you. And it's hard sometimes to decipher through what's truly Publishing Clearinghouse and what may be a knockoff or somebody mocking Publishers Clearinghouse. So when looking for those type of things, you want to look for misspellings, you want to look for maybe some sort of printing errors, maybe their symbols are not quite clear in the printing, they're fuzzy, things like that.
So do you think, are there some common threads through those sorts of schemes where, in general, it's you're being promised some money, but you have to pay a fee or taxes or something like that in advance? In other words, they want you to pay before you see any of your prize money.
That's common. And then what also is common is asking for personal identifying information and or bank account information. So there's also where they will ask for routing information, bank account information to deposit your money into, or you can wire money to them and they will get your account information that way as well. So anytime that somebody asks for personal identifying information or personal bank information, that should send up lots of red flags that this is not legitimate, because that information should not be shared.
That is a great tip.
Do you want to be a winner?
Sorry about that. So into our next, so we're moving from the mail here to the computer. And, to me, it seems like the computer is where a lot of this sort of crime is taking place now. If only because everybody's got a computer in their house, everybody, well, or nearly everyone, or even a cell phone that's connected to the internet. And so you're accessible to criminals who are targeting older folks in particular. And so we're going to take a look at a few different ways that criminals do use the computers and the internet to try and scam older folks. That includes things like phishing scams, which is what they're referring to as emails or advertisements or messages that are designed to trick you into clicking them. They a lot of times will ask, like you said, Jamie, for personal identifying information or bank account information. And they try to get you to cough that up by impersonating your bank or impersonating a government agency or something else like that. Some other ways is by installing a virus on a computer. That can occur through clicking links in email from senders that you don't know, and a number of different scams that can take place through online dating sites or social media, such as Facebook, and even work at home or investment scams. And we can see lottery scams again, moving from the mail onto the computer.
I would say, Ben, that computer with everybody has a computer, a cell phone. Everybody's on the internet constantly. This is probably the number one way that not only are seniors duped into these scams, but we see the FBI sees any range of age duped into these scams. So I think when it comes to the computer scams, the number one for seniors is going to be the romance scam because they're lonely. But then for the younger generation, it is more along the lines of Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, places like that where they are where scammers are taking advantage of our youth in those situations. But specific to seniors, it's going to be the computer is a really, really tough place for seniors to be able to decipher could possibly be a scam and what could possibly be real.
Well, hopefully we've got some tips that will help them do that. And we do have a video coming up next that's going to have a little bit of information about romance scams.
Vulnerable seniors are often victims of scams that hit their budgets hard.
Those who are victimized usually live alone or have physical limitations. In our continuing series right now, Breaking the Silence, Elder Abuse Awareness, WATE 6 on your side consumer reporter Don Dare explains why some seniors are at risk.
Scams targeting the elderly is big business. It's a frightening epidemic, especially for those who are unaware. For scammers, Facebook appears to be an easy way to contact potential victims. One of those we talked with lost her life savings. The other confesses she should have known better. Why did you believe this?
Idiot. That's just plain and simple. An idiot.
Pat Wilhoit admits she made a costly mistake when she started corresponding with this man who she thought was Paul Stewart. The picture, however, was copied. She didn't know that.
This is where it all started at.
It started with a friend request on Facebook. Describing himself as a high-ranking U.S. Army officer, Stewart claimed he was in Syria on a peacekeeping mission. Pat, a former U.S. Marine, admits she was smitten by him. Love is as sweet as your voice. Love is magical. She fell hard after he sent her love messages.
He wanted to make love to me, hold me in his arms, kiss me.
Convinced of his affection, Pat wired $5,600 so her so-called boyfriend could fly to Tennessee.
Elder victims are very vulnerable. We have had cases of someone pretending to befriend someone online.
Nora Monday of Community Health of East Tennessee is an expert on elder abuse. She says imposter online scammers are usually from overseas. To prosecute them, the scammer first must be identified. However, finding international imposters is next to impossible.
I borrowed the money,
How much?
$27,500 and $8,700 and $1,500.
More than $37,000 was sent in a bank-to-bank transfer to an imposter, in this case, a Derek Wayne. Rhonda spends a lot of time on Facebook. With severe Parkinson's disease, she's homebound. After corresponding for months, her online friend sent a text. He had come into a lot of money following a court judgment.
They awarded him $980,000.
He won the $980,000.
Yes.
The phony Derek Wayne told Rhonda he wanted to make her a partner and share the loot. But first, he needed her to pay some fees for him. She took the bait and sent the money. And why would he want you to have part of the money?
For taking care of it.
Romance scams exploit a senior's loneliness and vulnerability. Once trust is built between the two, the scammer then requests money, according to a Federal Committee on Aging report.
I think that the current financial scams, especially the romantic scams, are exceptionally savvy. It looks real.
Dr. Monica Crane specializes in geriatrics, the medical care of older adults. She says sometimes cognitive judgment diminishes for some older people, especially if there are physical issues and limitations.
For a lot of people, they look at the internet and it is real. If someone sends a photo, it must be the real person. What we find is people have trouble distinguishing something that is too good to be true from something that is actually a benefit.
Rhonda borrowed heavily against her house to pay off her debt. Pat never saw her money again either. If you have an older friend or relative who lives alone, find out who they may be talking with if they use social media. Don Dare, WATE, 6 on your side.
So I think that gave us a pretty good example of what a basic romance scam can look like, and it sort of highlights some of the difficulties that people may have in identifying when a romance scam is actually taking place. Jamie, do you think there are some obvious red flags that people can look for to sort of help know when, they may be looking at a romance scam?
Yes. So a couple things. The romance scams take place over time. These are not fast. These normally they are very good. The scammers are very good at developing a relationship. They say all the right things. They're always available. They're available in the night. They're available in the morning. They're available anytime that you want to talk. They are available. I think that is one red flag, but it is a nurtured relationship. I have talked to people that have been victims of romance scams, and they will have had a relationship, an online relationship, for 6 months before the request for money ever comes up. So at that point, they think that it's real. One of the big red flags is if there is a constant preparation for travel. There's always a drama that's happened. There's always an accident that's happened. There's always something that's happened that as to why you can't meet in person. So over that time frame that they're nurturing the relationship, there'll become requests to meet in person. Let me come see you. You come see me. But then there's always something that happens. There's always they're stopped at the airport because their visa isn't correct. They're always a lot of times it's military where their military orders have changed. They've had a family emergency, and it always happens at the 9th hour where they're almost here and then it doesn't happen. So that's a red flag. Also, if they are sending pictures, a lot of times just a simple Google search of that photograph or name or story that they're providing will develop some clues that that same situation has been reported by somebody else. So red flags, to answer your question, are that the person that is too good to be true and they're single, right? And that they are nurturing this long relationship. And then every time discussions are brought up about meeting in person, something tragic has happened or troublesome has happened that hasn't allowed them to. And then the discussion of money starts to come up of, do you have money? How much money? Can you send me money? I've had something happen that I need money. Hospital, normally it's around paying hospital bills, things like that.
I think that's great information. And I guess, you know, for our investigators who may be tuned in, can it be difficult for investigators to get victims of a romance scam to, I guess, even talk about what's happened, you know, in cases where, like you said, it's gone on for a long time and maybe they've developed an attachment for this person? Are there ways to get through to victims to encourage them to report this kind of conduct?
Is that for me, Ben, or is that for the
Oh,
group?
yes. Sorry, that was to you, Jamie. Yeah.
I thought maybe that was to the group. I'm sorry. Will you repeat your question one more time? I started reading through the chat to see if we had any answers.
Oh, yeah. Well, so what I was thinking is for our investigators who might be out there, it could be difficult to maybe get through to victims of romance scams where, you know, they've put all this time into what feels like a real relationship. They developed an attachment for this person. They may be reluctant to provide the information that an investigator needs to build a case. Are any tips to try to get kind of wade through that?
Yes. So I have dealt with that specifically where I've met with a victim time and time again, and they really have a hard time understanding that this is real. The best way that I have, a couple things, right? One is, do they have a confidant within their family that they trust and you can reach out to receive assistance from? So although there is going to be extreme embarrassment and sadness, and because they've lost this relationship and that they've been duped, and they're upset with themselves, and they're embarrassed, and then they're sad. But if there's somebody within their network that you can reach out to, that you can gain their trust with, so that both of you guys can start talking to and providing examples. It's a slow process, investigators out there, when it comes to trying to have a victim come to the realization that they've been a victim and that all of this time and effort they've put into this relationship isn't real. It is very hurtful, and it's going to take some time to get them to understand that. And you have to handle it with gently, right? Because it is a very traumatic event that they're going through. So what I have found is, by getting the assistance from a trusted confidant of them, and then providing them with examples of, this is what makes it a scam. And sometimes you can do that by providing other, like, pictures on the internet saying, see, this is a picture where this same picture was used with various different names, but just helping them through that process. But the number one way is to find a confidant, because you don't have the relationship with that victim that they may have with a best friend or with a sibling or with a child.
Makes good sense. And I think that it would apply probably to, you know, advocates and friends and family out there who may have concerns about friends or relatives who are falling victim to things like this.
Vulnerable seniors are often.
So we've got a couple more slides on this because, you know, as Jamie said, the romance scam is a big issue. And so some help in identifying, or here's some more general information about it, I suppose. And romance scams are very prevalent, and in large part because there are so many people out there using social media in one form or another, whether it's Facebook or a dating site or something else, a chat room. So scammers know how to use those sorts of things to target their victims. And like Jamie talked about, they will spend a long time making a connection with a victim before they, you know, find a reason to insert that request for money into the conversation and the back and forth. And they always have a story to use to try and play on a victim's emotions or generosity or the, you know, the feelings that they've developed in order to separate the victims from their money.
And Ben, I'd like to note that a lot of times in these romance scams, they send things to their victims. So they will send
Oh, interesting.
flowers. They will, yeah. Oh, yes. We've had victims receive flowers. They receive phones. They receive computers. They receive Valentine's Day gifts, birthday gifts. Like, there is a lot of effort put into romancing this relationship and making the victim believe. But in the end, like I said, it could take 6 months, it can take a year, but they will get to the point where they know so much information about their victims that these victims truly believe that this is real, and they know. I mean, they have spent that much time together. So they're constantly on the phone, they're constantly available. And so by the end, when it comes time to start asking for the money, and the money will start small, and it will small, it doesn't automatically send me $50,000 or $100,000. It starts small. Send me $30, send me $50. I'm running out of minutes for my phone. And then it just gradually gets more and more and more and more. And before they know it, they've sent quite a bit of money. At more times than not, they've spent everything. The victims has sent everything that they have in savings.
Wow. Well, I think we've got another video, and this is going to be hopefully we're not rehashing too much, but I do think it's important. And we've got another video that deals with the romance scams.
Was it more along lines of a courtship, or was it more along lines of a friendship?
I think there was a mixture of both. You know, it's funny. There were quite a few calls, but there were a lot more texts. The conversations were sometimes kind of short. Oh, I have to go. And you would hear noise in the background, like he was talking to somebody else. I did, I guess, always sort of have a little thought that there was maybe something wrong with this. He said that he was a CPA and tired, but he still did this for friends. He said he could make a lot of money for me. And I thought, oh, well, that would be nice. And that would be, you know, something that I could do for my kids. It was the same month that Consumer Report came out with a whole thing about elder fraud. Yep. And a friend was visiting me over the weekend, and I showed it to him, and I said that, you know, I was involved in something like this. And he said, well, you know, I'm going to visit tomorrow, but we're going to the police. I don't think that I ever stopped to add it up. I just knew it was big sums of money, more than I'd ever had at my disposal before. I mean, and I didn't say anything to anybody on Thanksgiving about it because I thought, well, I can't, you know, mess this up totally. My son says to this day, why did you check out with me? I don't know. Other people need to know about this.
So I think that's pretty consistent with what we've been talking about here in regards to these romance scams. And we've got another slide. This one's a little goofy, but it says, you know, in these romance scams, you're online and you're talking to someone who has got a picture up and appears to be tall, dark, and handsome, rich, and looking for love. And that may just be too good to be true. And in reality, you've got an ogre who's there to separate you from your money.
I think if you guys had something to take away from that, it is that if you noticed, it started small and then it got larger. And then before long, it was out of control. And the only way that that person recognized that it was a scam was by some sort of public message of some sort regarding the consumer report saying this is going on. So out of all the information you received today, I think the biggest thing is just share with whoever you can share that, hey, if you're contacted, because our seniors get lonely and they are piddling around on the computer and this can happen. So just share if you're contacted by somebody and you want to start an online relationship. But if it gets to the point where you're starting to think about sending money, talk to somebody first before you do it.
I think that's a really good point. And maybe also if you're the friend or the relative or the advocate, ask questions. Sometimes they can be uncomfortable questions, but if you've got someone who you're worried about or you're concerned about, who, you find out they are sending money to someone, you try to dig in a little bit and see if you can see what's really going on. What we've got up on the screen is a letter from a case that was a real romance scam. And I don't think we need to read the whole thing, but what it does show is sort of the very kind of overly flowery language in the beginning. And it just reemphasizes that eventually there's always an ask, and it's the ask for money. In this case, it's a very large amount. Probably this wasn't the first request for money in that particular case. So I know, Jamie, you talked about some red flags and made some really good points about how to avoid becoming a victim of a romance scam. And not to belabor it too much, but we've got, be aware when you've got new love interests online who are asking you for money with incredibly drama-filled lives, who always have some sort of reason that they're short and they need money right now to get out of a jam. And if you are involved in a relationship online, and especially a new relationship where you have never met this individual person, be cautious about sending money in any amount or in any manner. And Jamie, like you said, if you have questions, check it out. Run it by somebody else in the family or an advocate to see what they think about the situation.
I'll bring up one additional point that these scammers are very, very tricky and they're very, very good at what they do. I can't reemphasize that enough, that they're very good at what they do. I remember specifically a case that I worked where a gal owned a tea company where it was both the brick and mortar store, but also an online store where she would send tea, that you drink. And somebody overseas in the military reached out to her. She was recently widowed and wanted to get involved in her business. I wanted to try her tea and then wanted to help her with her business. He sent her, like I said, he sent her flowers. And before she finally realized what was going on, she had sent the money that she was supposed to use for her daughter's wedding. She had sent her her entire retirement. And it was all around him coming to see her. And he never could, because he always had, his son was always in the hospital, or he got stopped by the at the airport and his visa was messed up, and or he needed help with money to pay doctor's bills or get a new computer. She sent him computers, so on and so forth. So, but they're very good. They know your name, they know your phone numbers, they know your emails, they know your family. By the end of it, they've got a lot of information. So even it's hard sometimes to end that contact because they have so much information. So I just want to reemphasize that sometimes it looks real on the front end, but before, in the middle of it all, they'll start asking for money, and that's always the trigger.
That's great information. In our next slides, we're going to move on to some scams over the phone. But I think before we do that, we're still looking at scams on the computer, and I know there are dozens of different ways those can take place. And the romance scam was one of the big ones that we wanted to look at. But I wanted to ask you, Jamie, is there another form of scam that's perpetrated using a computer over the internet that you think our seniors should be particularly aware of?
If there is a scam that you can possibly think of, or if there is something that you could think of to get money out of somebody, it's it can be done. Another large one is going to be Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. Those are two additional computer scams that we see a lot of. People want to buy a lawnmower. People want to just buy things in general. And a lot of times those things aren't real. And so they'll send money ahead of time to either pay for the item to be shipped, or for whatever the down payment maybe, or shipping costs. The shipping costs have to be paid in front, so on and so forth. So that is another one that we see a lot of, is Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Anytime that you're sending money ahead of getting your product, is also a red flag.
Are there some, payment methods in those cases that you think people should watch out for that might be particularly suspect? Like if somebody's asking you to pay for a lawnmower using gift cards, there's something weird's happening.
Yeah, so we're not into the further in the slideshow. You have some other other ones regarding gift cards and sending in the gift cards. But payment methods, yes, if somebody contacts you and asks you to go to, I know Walgreens isn't a thing here on the island, but wherever they have those prepaid gift cards, Kmart maybe, and they ask you to scratch the back and send them the number off of the back, then that is one way that you can guarantee that money on that card is going to be gone. And that's another form of fraud that our elders are experiencing, is being asked to go get that card bin. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one method. There are some online payment methods that will secure your money. And I don't know for sure if PayPal is one of those, that if you experience fraud, then you can report it to PayPal and you can get your money back. But definitely the gift cards, Visa cards, where you have to scratch the back and give the number, that is going to be a red flag that your money's going to be gone.
Interesting.
There's no getting that back.
So I guess if we take a look at some scams over the phone and some of the ways that those take place, I think there's sort of an infinite variety of these scams, just like on the computer. We're going to look at just a couple of those here. And those include things like IRS or Treasury Department scam calls. And this is sort of a government imposter or government impersonation scam. In general, we can tell you that the IRS or the Treasury is not going to call you on the phone because you're late or haven't paid your taxes and demand immediate payment, or threaten to throw you in jail. You're going to get a letter from the agency detailing the issue with some instructions. And a couple other examples here. We've got a grandparent scam where you might get a fake call from a grandchild, or somebody impersonating a grandchild or a nephew or a niece, or maybe someone who claims to be a friend of a grandchild or a nephew or niece, saying that person's in trouble. They need bail money, they're in the hospital. It could be anything like that, and demanding money immediately. And in some cases, you can deal with some unscrupulous telemarketers using high pressure sales tactics, or even totally fraudulent sales, where they're trying to market something over the phone to demand payment for products that don't actually exist.
And if there is, Ben, I'd like to bring up, if there is ever a time that you get a call that you're not too sure if it's real or not, because like I said, they're good at what they do. So at any time you do get a call and and you wonder if it could be real, whether it's from the IRS or whether it's from the government or whether it's from ATF, I've gotten those asking or telling you that you have to pay within a certain amount of time, or a warrant's going to be issued for your arrest. Please feel free to call any FBI office in the entire nation, locally here on Guam or anywhere else, and you can ask to speak to an agent and tell the agent what phone call you received, and that agent can help you through that process, whether to vet it out, to identify, is that a real call or is that not real? And I would encourage anybody throughout this entire slide that at any point, if something happens where you're contacted and you wonder if it could be real or not, take a moment and call your local FBI office or any office, or even a 1-800 number for the FBI, and ask them this. provide them with this scenario, and any agent can help vet that for you through the process. And I think even the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ben, do you guys take calls like that?
You know, we will. I think we probably refer them to you.
Okay.
As the
Yes,
investigative agent.
understood. Definitely. But we do take those calls on a daily basis. A lot of my examples of all these scams that I've come across or I've heard about have been from somebody calling saying, you know, I just got this call. Could this be real? Or I've been involved in this online relationship. Could it be fake? And so then I'll help them through that process by taking down some information, running it through our systems, talking them through what it is that's happened. And then I can help them decipher if it could be real or if it could be fake. And that's before they've lost any money. And that way we can stop it ahead of time. So there is no regrets and there is no devastating potential life problems.
That's great. I'm glad you guys are able to do that. Are there some ways that these scammers can be particularly tricky? Are they able to, you know, spoof a phone number so that your caller ID really looks like, you know, the IRS is calling you on your cell phone? Or
Yes, absolutely. We get that all the time. Where somebody can spoof a phone number. And I don't know if it's so much here on the island, but it absolutely is in the mainland. They spoof numbers to make them look like a government agency. They've spoofed our FBI number. They've spoofed the U.S. Attorney's Office. They've spoofed the local police department's number. They spoof numbers, and they can spoof email addresses. They can spoof phone numbers, and they're all coming from international. So it is hard just by looking at a phone number or looking at an email address to identify if that could be coming from an actual place, because if you Google that number is going to come back as that place. So it's more and more tricky every day with technology.
so even when you try to verify the information, sometimes that can still trick you. And I think what we've got on the screen is sort of a typical scenario, I think. And I think we've described it pretty well already, but it does involve a scammer calling you on the phone. They're saying, I'm so-and-so from the IRS. And, you know, you forgot to pay your taxes or you underpaid your taxes. And if you don't pay up right now, you know, we're going to issue a warrant for your arrest. We're going to send the police over to arrest you. And they demand payment in ways that are unusual and that a typical government agency would not do so, such as through wire transfer, gift cards, or some other electronic means.
Hey, Ben, in the chat group, I wanted to bring up that Evelyn Cruz had made mention that she investigated an elderly case. And within her chat, she mentioned that the behaviors of her victim changed, and that's what was a red flag. So I think that's a good point to bring out also, is that although they're going to hide, if you have an elder or a senior that's involved in some sort of a relationship, an online relationship, that they may change behaviors or try to hide their behaviors. So that's another good point that Evelyn brings up, that by being aware of either rushing to go to bed early or locking herself or himself in a room that normally they wouldn't be doing, or going places that they normally wouldn't go to. All of these can be red flags. Thanks, Evelyn, for bringing that up.
That's a great point. Thank you for doing that. And I think what we've got here is a short video with sort of illustrating how an IRS scam might work.
Scam artists are pretending to be IRS officials to get your money. They'll call, email, or text you, claiming you owe back taxes or there's a problem with your tax return. They even rig caller ID to make the call look official. They play on your fears. They threaten to take your driver's license or sue, arrest, or deport you. They want you to pay fast. What's the truth? The truth is the IRS's first contact with you will always be a letter in the mail. It's not a phone call, email, or text message. They won't insist that you pay with a prepaid debit card, a wire transfer, or cashier's check. Now you know. Has an IRS imposter contacted you? Report it at ftc.gov/imposters.
Well, I think that
Scam.
That sort of highlighted things that I think we've already talked over pretty well. So how do you avoid becoming a victim of a government imposter scam? Well, we would encourage you to watch out for the red flags that we've described already. And remember, again, that government agencies are not going to call you on the phone and threaten to arrest you unless you make immediate payments. Government agencies are not going to demand payment through a gift card. They're not going to send you to Kmart or anywhere else in order to pay your tax bill. One other thing to look out for here, if a caller like that is instructing you not to tell your family members about what is happening, to keep this a secret, keep it between you and me, that's probably a sign that you're dealing with a scam. You're dealing with something that's not real. And if you are ever in doubt, like Jamie said, hang up the phone, and you can call the FBI to verify. And another thing you could do is call that agency directly. So if they claim they're from the IRS, you can hang up the phone and call the agency, call the IRS themselves to see if what they're talking about is really legitimate. So here's another example of a way that financial abuse or financial exploitation can take place over the phone. And this is in the form of a tech support scam. So this is something that I think does happen over the phone, but could very easily happen over the computer as well, through email or another means, where you've got a scammer that claims to be a technician from a tech company. For example, they call you on the phone, I'm so-and-so from Microsoft, and we've identified viruses or malware on your computer or your device. And in order to repair it, we need you to give us remote access to your computer or your device. And of course, if you do that, those individuals have access to files on your computer or on your phone or other device, and can get a hold of your personal information and use that for some form of identity theft or fraud. And in some cases, they can lock you out of your device or your computer and sort of hold it ransom and demand payment to get back into it. And I think similar to the government imposter scams, ways to avoid this, red flags to look out for. In general, if someone is telling you not to tell your family about it, then you're looking at something that's probably scam activity. And always be ready to hang up the phone. And if they say they're from Microsoft, you can call Microsoft back directly and see what is really going on.
I think that's a good point, is that don't self-vet it yourself. So I know I've gotten the phone calls, I've received the emails asking to have access to my computer, that there's a problem. I get the email probably once a week that for whatever reason they need access to my computer or whatever. But I think that brings up a good point, that if you're not sure who you're talking to, just hang up on them. Nobody's going to be offended. I know that we live in a world, and especially our seniors don't want to offend people, but just hang up and then find the phone number yourself by Googling it or getting it off the back of, I know a lot of our products that we purchase now have a customer service phone number on the product itself. So there is a good place to look for it there as well. But I can't stress enough that this happens quite a bit, where computers are taken over, personal identifying information is taken off that, and then they're unable to get their computer back, and there's a lot of information that is stolen. So anytime somebody's asking for accessing your computer, it should be a huge red flag.
And Jamie, do you think, are there some other red flags you could look for when you're dealing with something like a tech support scam? I mean, I know just like when you can spoof a phone number, you can sometimes spoof an email address, which can make it pretty confusing and pretty convincing to get an email from somebody like says it's from Microsoft.com.
Yes. So a lot of times if you look, okay, well, that's kind of a double question. So if you're looking at whether or not the email spoofed, a lot of times you can look in the email address. And if you go to the specific email address, you'll see there'll be an additional .us or something in there that will say, or will provide an example that it's coming from out of the country. That's one way. And the second way is, a lot of times in the emails, particularly, they're going to be misspelled. They're going to have broken English. They'll have inappropriate punctuation. a lot of times. But then also when you get the phone call from a potential Microsoft or Apple or somebody wanting access to your computer, if you were to ask just some basic questions about maybe who they're looking for, what's my computer device information that you need, do you have a number already that you're looking for? And you'll see that they won't have any other information other than just calling and trying to get you to give them information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great information.
Yeah.
And Jamie, I guess I noticed in the chat we do have a question that says,
Okay.
if we suspect an elder is a victim of large-scale financial scams, can we, as mandated reporters, report directly to the FBI in conjunction with reporting to adult? Oh, I think you just answered it. To Adult
I
Protective
did.
Services, or just refer to APS? And maybe for the group, just let us know what the answer is there.
Absolutely. So if you think that there is an elder that has been a victim of financial fraud, specific to this question, a large one, definitely call the FBI, but then also call APS, because APS has some different, they have different services in the FBI. Obviously, we're going to specifically address and try to investigate the fraud part of it. We're not going to be able to provide any additional support to the person or the family other than just investigating the crime. I do want to make note that if a family member has lost money, the likelihood of getting that back, or even the likelihood of identifying the person that is behind the scam, is slim, guys. So that's why it's so very important that we get the information out ahead of time, that to stop it before it happens, because it's really, really difficult, almost a lot of times, to make victims whole again. It's going to be really hard to do that, because a lot of these scams are not from the United States. A lot of these scams are from other countries, Nigeria, and I don't mean to specifically point. It's just that as an example, I've seen Nigeria as a location where a lot of scams come from. So to answer that question, do both FBI and APS if you have that occurring.
I think we're going to look at one more slide before we take a break. Let me see if I can get us advanced here. So we're moving away from computers and the phone to in-person scams. And we could spend all day, I think, going through all these. We've just sort of listed a few here to be aware of and to think about. The first one is door-to-door repairs or sales. And I'm not sure that we see so much of that in Guam or the CNMI, but it may be more common in the mainland. Family members are often a source of financial exploitation and fraud. And that can overlap with a couple of these other categories here, where you're dealing with a family member who is a guardian or has a power of attorney and misuses that in some way, or has access to bank accounts and is siphoning money away. This can happen in any number of ways. Investment fraud, it sort of ties into the video we watched earlier, where we had sort of a Ponzi scheme that took advantage of older folks. Jamie, are there any of these that you want to touch on sort of before we take a short break?
Well, absolutely. So being new to the island, the door-to-door repairs or sales, I don't know if you guys experience that after storms. So that is a big time that the states see it, is if we have a storm that comes through, whether it be roof repairs that need to be done, or if there's a tornado, hailstorms, that's where you see the door-to-door repairs or sales come on the most. So I don't know here if you guys see if there's a storm here, if you have an influx of contractors or an influx of people coming to assist with the cleanup of storms, then this may be where you would see door-to-door repairs or sales. Again, I say don't pay upfront. if they're a reputable business, they won't need money up front. They can wait. Investment fraud, we saw the video of it on the investment fraud, and maybe we'll get into it and talk a little bit later in the investment fraud category. But that is also a real thing where people take advantage, where they are legitimate brokers or investors, and then they'll take advantage of our seniors. And there is an organization out there that can assist with that investigation as well. And I'm not sure if it's in the slide presentation or not, regarding it's called FINRA, and it's in relation to the Senior Safe Act. I don't know if you've got it in here or not, Ben. But
I'm not sure we have that in the slides. Maybe you can put that in the chat.
Okay,
so that
I could do that.
the folks in attendance can see that.
Yeah, I can do that. But then I think all the other ones are pretty darn self-explanatory when it comes to the, family members are a given. But I think the investment fraud is one that's a toughie, because I think, like we saw in the video, you have a church, the pastor of a church that is also doing investments. And so that is going to be a tough one, because he's a legitimate person. He legitimately had his securities license, and they really were investing for many years with him. And then it all came folding down. So that can be a hard one.
I think, unless we've got any questions on the in-person scams, maybe we'll go ahead and take our break. If Cynthia is still out there, if that's okay with you, if this is a good time.
Absolutely. And in fact, I'm just standing by here. Just want to say thank you for sharing that information. Just wanted to make a note that, in as much as we are focusing on elders and these scams and these situations, it actually knows no age limits, because I certainly know that this can happen to our younger adults as well. And so I think this is a good takeaway message for anyone on whether or not you work with elders, perhaps being an advocate for yourself as well. So thank you for sharing the information. And I know you've got more in the latter half of the webinar this morning. So we want to thank again Ben and Jamie for being on board. And we're going to take a 10-minute break at this time. And feel free to type in your questions in the chat or in the Q&A if anything comes up during the break. And we'll be right back. And let's call it, say, a minute before 10 a.m. We'll be back. All right. So grab your favorite beverage, and we will be able to share info with you again. Thank you. Happy day and welcome back. We are here for our second half of today's presentation with Assistant U.S. Attorney Ben Petersburg and Special Agent FBI Jamie Cabot. Thank you so much for joining us again. Just wanted to also say thanks so much to the Department of Public Health and Social Services with the Division of Senior Citizens, the Bureau of Adult Protective Services. We want to thank them too for partnering with us to bring to you the information. And I know in the chat there was a question on how to report. And I'm sure Ben and Jamie will have that information, but we also have more information on that when we have our folks from the Bureau of Adult Protective Services giving us certainly information on that as well. So we thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget there's still tomorrow and next week as well. So Ben, Jamie, thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. And I think we can try to address that question to some extent here today. I know there are going to be lots of resources in the other presentations about reporting various forms of abuse locally, but there are certainly ways to report elder abuse federally and investigative resources for that. And Jamie, maybe you can talk about that a little bit here.
Absolutely. One way, so good question, right? How do you report it? Where do you start? And then how is it investigated? So one way is in your chat group, you'll see that there's the Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3. That is at ic3.gov. What that is, it's an international complaint center where people that have been victims of fraud, and this is specific to fraud, and it's specific to internet fraud or phone fraud or scams over the computer, they can go to that website and put in all the relevant information regarding the fraud that they have been a victim of. What that does is it provides an international database that all of that information is then compiled together, because if you're the victim here in Guam, there may be a victim in Tennessee, there may be a victim in Georgia, there may be a victim in Florida. It takes all of that information of victims that are potentially the same suspect that's committed that crime, compiles it together, and then it disseminates the information to the appropriate agency and or region that will investigate that crime. So that's a good place to start. The second place to call is your local FBI office to make that report. Also, the question was, can you report with APS and or FBI? Is it one or the other? No, it can be both. So we frequently at the FBI, we encourage people to make reports to APS in this situation. We encourage people to make reports to the local police department and then also to us, so that there's multiple bases that are covered and all of the organizations can work together to hopefully come up with a successful resolution. When it comes to investigating the case, that is the long drawn out hard part, because a lot of times these fraud cases are intense. They're intense with IP addresses, they're intense with spoofing, they're intense with the location of the bad guy. And quite frankly, sometimes we just can never figure it out. So, but like I said earlier, by reporting to multiple agencies, every agency has a different resource and the ability to help in different ways. So the more people that we can get on a team together to help that victim, the better off we're going to be.
Thanks, Jamie. I hope that helps. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, please feel free to put those in the chat and we'll try to keep an eye on that and get those answered during the presentation or at the end. So we're going to jump back into our slideshow. In our next section, we've got a little section on money mules. And, you know, money mules may not necessarily be a scam in the sense that, you know, the person who's acting as a money mule may not lose money necessarily. But it is a problem and it is a form of illegal activity that does target older folks and, you know, people who are looking to work from home in particular. In this slide, we've got a short definition of a money mule. It's someone who acts under instructions from a scammer to receive fraud victim funds in the United States and then forward them to co-conspirators also in the United States or to accounts controlled by the scammer abroad. And I don't know if that's the clearest definition, but the point is the money mules are what scammers use to get the money from the US elsewhere. And so what they'll do is contact someone who is looking to work from home, for example, and say, I have a job for you. You open a bank account and you're going to receive deposits and you keep maybe a small share for yourself, and then you forward that money on to other bank accounts at my instruction, or you withdraw cash from the account and take it to Western Union and wire it somewhere, following my instructions. And generally there's some kind of cover story so that the money mule thinks this money may be connected to some kind of legitimate business, but not always.
Ben, if I may, a lot of times money mules will start with the romance scams also. So I've seen this where I've seen it multiple times where women, I mainly speak to women because a lot of times it's women that fall victims to the sweetheart scams or the romance scams, where they will start out and then they will start asking them to do these things, to become a money mule. I've also seen it it's not just money, but it's also goods. I've seen shoes. I've seen, like I said, household goods or goods of some sort, clothing, shoes, to where they'll get product and then send that product on. But a lot of times I wanted to just make a point that it's not just random. It's another form of where they start a relationship with the money mule, and the money mule does not know that they're being used the way that they're being used. They think it's a relationship.
Interesting. There's a lot of overlap between this scam activity. I think in our next slide, we've got a short video that will tell us a little bit about the issues with money mules.
Davidson has the details. The pandemic has people searching for employment and open to fraudsters offering fake jobs. Now they're making job seekers money mules.
A money mule is someone who transfers illegal money on behalf of another individual or at the direction of another individual.
FBI Supervisory Special Agent Patrick Duffy says the scammers tell the applicant they need to pay money as some part of the application process.
Any application that asks you to pay money or initiate a wire transfer to apply for the job is obviously very skeptical.
Cybersecurity expert Matt Barnett with the 7X tells us he's seeing more of these scams targeting people wanting to work from home.
These attackers are going through the hiring process, as it were, and in that, they get all this information about the user, and that can be used for identity theft, or it can be used to initiate transfers for, direct deposit going the other way.
Barnett says if a job seems too good to be true, it probably is. And if you're applying for a position, do research on the company.
Look at their website, call their phone number, go onto Google and look at their street view, see if they actually have a business where they have an address listed. All of these things will give you indicators as to whether the business is legitimate or not.
When job advertisements are poorly written with grammatical errors and spelling mistakes, something that should pop up as a red flag and something to be wary about.
But Supervisory Special Agent Duffy says scammers aren't just setting their sights on job seekers.
It's a grandparent scam where a fraudster is calling up an elderly person and telling them that their grandchild has been kidnapped overseas and they need to provide a ransom. It's happening in lottery scams where individuals and victims are being called saying that they've just won the lottery, but they have to pay taxes on their winnings before they can receive their proceeds. A variety of different scams ongoing right now where money mules are used specifically.
Anyone can be a money mule.
An unwitting money mule could be your grandparent, could be your next door neighbor, someone that was recruited online via a dating website, via social networking platform to open up a bank account on behalf of somebody else and start transferring money. They have no idea what they're doing is wrong.
But they are doing something wrong, and the FBI and its partners are reaching out to potential money mules.
We interview them and we serve them with what's called a money mule warning letter. That warning letter basically puts that money mule on notice that, unwittingly or wittingly, they are serving in a capacity of a money mule, and the actions that they're taking part in need to stop.
In 2019, the FBI says it took action against about 600 money mules. This year, that number is around 2,300. And those warning letters across the country, 300 were served in 2019. In 2020, more than 2,000 were delivered.
You're really seeing just a huge uptick in what we believe are potential money mules operating all across the globe.
For NBC 10 Responds, Tracy Davidson, NBC 10 News.
So I think there from that video we can see
Davidson has the details.
give you a fair idea of what a money mule is and what they do, and you can see that it is a growing problem. And the reason it's growing is because these scams keep proliferating, and you've got criminal enterprises that need to launder the money that they obtain from those scams. And Jamie, I know you touched on this, but it's important to note that money mules can be recruited in a number of different ways through social media websites and social engineering, and often that is through false job advertisements. It could be through dating websites, like you said. It could be an offshoot from a romance scam where someone gains your trust, builds a relationship with you, and starts asking you to do some favors for them. Help me transfer this money to another person, to a relative or a friend. And it even occurs in person. And it's important to know that, while you may not be victimized in the sense that you're out money, you are being drawn into illegal activity, whether you know it or not.
Yeah. And that's a good point to bring up, that you're being drawn into illegal activity because money mules are being prosecuted. So they're talking about the letters that are being sent out, and that is coming from a national level and directed to the local FBI offices. And then the FBI agent will go out and meet with that person and serve that letter and tell them that they need to cease, or they could potentially be prosecuted. And I can specifically know in one case where I went out and talked to a woman, she did not want to believe what she was doing was wrong, and she ultimately was getting prosecuted, and she had lost so much money, and not only the romance scam proportion of it, but then also the money mule proportion of it. So, and she just didn't want to believe that she was being used and it wasn't real.
And so it really does run the gamut, where you've got people who do seem to know what's going on versus, unwitting money mules. And so there's a little illustration of that in this slide here, where, a person may start out as the victim of a scam, like Jamie said, and then they're asked to use their bank account to send scam money, to receive scam money from other individuals and send that on to accounts controlled by the scammers themselves. In some cases, you do have people who know perfectly well what they're doing, but they may not know the entire scope of the conspiracy itself or the extent of the scam, or in some ways they just don't want to know, as long as the money keeps flowing through and they get to siphon off a little bit of it for themselves. And in the sort of most egregious case, you've got fully complicit co-conspirators. And these are people who might use a fake business to open a business bank account, or even fake identification documents to open bank accounts in order to facilitate the transfer of these scam funds. So it's important to be aware of that so that you don't become an unwitting money mule, and so that that money never touches your bank account, and sort of help reduce the possibility that you end up participating in criminal conduct. And we've got a little bit of information about business email compromise cases, and just to show the scale of this. And this says back in 2016, almost 70% of these particular scam transactions involved US-based money mule accounts. So, like we said earlier, these scammers and the criminal enterprises have to have a way to get the money to accounts they control. And often their number one choice is to use money mules, and often they do target older folks and take advantage of them that way. And I think this sort of deal sends you the same message. 70% of the US victims sent their money to a US money mule, and that's just the first hop. Oftentimes, that money takes several hops thereafter, even within the United States, through other money mules where they call them funnel accounts, where the money is sort of gathered together and ultimately sent off to accounts controlled by the scammers. And I think this is still historical information. This may not be from 2021, but we can see that financial institutions across the country end up being used as money mule accounts. For some reason, we've been able to identify that accounts in California, Florida, and Texas account for nearly half of all, this is business enterprise or business email compromise attempts. Many money mule accounts are used for only one transaction, and some, like we said earlier, are opened using false documents. So the money mule issue is important. Even if you aren't losing money, you may be drawn into criminal activity, and that's certainly something you want to be aware of. In our next section, and we did touch on this earlier, it deals with gift cards and the ways that scammers are using gift cards in order to obtain funds, often in conjunction with other scams. And we've got a little illustration from the Federal Trade Commission. And in particular, they've been able to say that gift cards and reloadable cards, or maybe reloadable debit cards, are the #1 payment method for imposter scams in particular. It says most of these scammers are demanding payments with a gift card, and the percentage of consumers who told the Federal Trade Commission that they paid a scammer with a gift card has increased 270%. That's from 2015 to 2018. So it's definitely increasing in popularity and prevalence. And victims are directed to buy these gift cards at all sorts of places. These aren't necessarily retailers that we have here in Guam and the CNMI. They're talking about Walmart, Target, Walgreens, but they are certainly available on island, at a place like Kmart, and it is very possible that it's something that you could see here. And I think we've got a short video from the FTC that talks about this.
Let's say someone calls and says he's from the IRS. He says you owe taxes and need to pay right away by getting a gift card at the store. Should you do it? No. It's a scam. Government agencies will never make you pay with a gift card. Now let's say the caller claims to be from a tech support company. He says he needs to fix a problem with your computer after you pay him with a gift card. Should you? No. That's a scam too. Real tech support companies don't work like that or make you pay with a gift card. What if you get a call from someone who says she's a relative or friend and needs money right now? She begs you to go buy her a gift card. Should you do it? No. That's also a scam. Gift cards wouldn't help real family members or friends in a real emergency. Gift cards are for gifts, not for payments. Anyone who tells you to pay with a gift card is a scammer. And once you've shared the gift card number and PIN, your money is probably gone. So what do? If you have paid with a gift card, contact the company that issued the card right away, and then tell the FTC. Reporting to the company and the FTC helps us fight these scams. Go to ftc.gov/giftcards to learn more about how to protect yourself and others.
I think one of the points in that video that's worth noting is the idea of sort of thinking through the demands that these scammers make. They said in there, if somebody calls you on the phone and says, I've had an emergency and my car broke down, will you go buy me some gift cards? And you stop and think about it, what are you going to do with a gift card to fix a flat tire? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So we know that these scammers they can be very persuasive, and they use sort of high pressure tactics to try to, push you to panic in some ways by saying, look, there's an emergency right now. We need somebody, you need to do this right now to go help and go buy a gift card. And it can be definitely can be difficult in the moment to deal with that. But hopefully when you see videos like this and you think about what we've talked about in this presentation, it will help trigger that sort of red flag to stop and think about just what it is that these scammers are asking for.
Let's say
So we're shifting gears here a little bit away from the different types of financial exploitation and financial abuse, and looking a little bit more at who are the people who perpetrate this sort of abuse. And based on the number of and different varieties of scams, I think it's easy to see that it really could be anyone. And commonly it is family, friends, neighbors, or acquaintances. And it's an unfortunate fact that, I think we can say that the majority of these scams are perpetrated by people but these are the people who may have the most access, may have a pre-existing relationship with you, or have built up trust over time. And that can also include other professionals. And like we see on the slide, that could be lawyers, doctors, financial advisors, clergy, caregivers, guardians. And it can definitely include strangers, which can, like we've talked about, can be people over the phone, like a telemarketer, can be people in person, like a door-to-door sales or repair person. And of course, it can be people over the computer, which could be a new love interest or something of that nature. And what we have here is a short video that talks about financial exploitation that is committed by family members.
Patricia King was a widow who was living alone in East Palo Alto. She was diagnosed with dementia. Miss King was 88 years old in 2008 when her niece, Miss Remmert, moved in with her. It was helpful to her at the outset to have her niece living with her because it was somebody to help her out around the house and keep her company. What she started to do was slowly consolidate her aunt's financial accounts, and she also had her aunt sign a quitclaim deed to her home, transferring ownership of the home from Miss King to Miss Remmert, the offender. Miss Remmert's cousins were becoming increasingly concerned about their aunt because of the isolation of Miss King that Miss Remmert was imposing. She was making it increasingly difficult for family members to come and visit.
Shirley began to isolate my aunt by becoming more limiting of the family, and also of her friends and church members of coming to see my Aunt Pat.
Shirley Remmert had changed the locks on the exterior fence surrounding the home and had changed the locks on the home itself. So family members could no longer gain access to the home.
I had called my aunt and I let her know that I was coming. I called the police. Okay, all I want to do is see Auntie Pat. I don't care. And Shirley called the police and asked that the police remove me from the house.
There were multiple parties that made reports to Adult Protective Services expressing concern about Miss King's welfare. One of the reports came from the bank where she had a checking account. She went to the bank on 4 occasions and she made 4 $10,000 withdrawals. The amount of those withdrawals, combined with how close in time they all were, caught the bank's attention, and Bank of America made a report to Adult Protective Services that these were suspicious transactions on an elder's account and asked Adult Protective Services to look into them.
A social worker who's described as a deputy public guardian who does just financial abuse cases became involved in the case because of the financial allegations.
They phoned Miss Remmert in advance and they made arrangements to meet up with Miss Remmert at Miss King's house. The deputy public guardian made the decision to reach out to the East Palo Alto Police Department and ask them please to send an officer as a civil standby to simply provide safety and make sure that things at the home went as smoothly as possible.
She kind of gave me a brief of who she was going to talk to and why she was going to talk to her. I knew we had something a little more than just a civil standby. She had some substantial evidence and information.
When they went to the residence, they found Shirley there with Aunt Pat. The deputy public guardian had a very pointed and direct conversation with Shirley about the nature of the financial improprieties that they were aware of based on Pat's financial documents. And Shirley was taken aback, to say the least.
Miss Remmert was nervous. She was inconsistent. At that point, she threw her hands up and said, I liquidated the money.
What?
It's in my room. And at that point, I escorted her to her bedroom. She then pulled out a box of money. In the end, after counting, it was about $80,400. Due to Miss Remmert's inconsistencies with her answers, and finally showing us the money that she did liquidate, I arrested her.
Most financial elder abuse investigations are complex, and we generally advise law enforcement to gather their evidence and then consult with the district attorney's office to see what the next steps are before taking a suspect into custody. But in this particular case, the fact that the quick-thinking East Palo Alto Police Department apprehended Miss Remmert on the spot was crucial to our ability to not only preserve the cash that was seized from the home, but also to freeze the home and execute a search warrant. And a tremendous amount of crucial documentary evidence was discovered. This document over here, it says quit claim deed. When you signed this, did you believe that you were giving away your house?
Oh no, I'm not giving away my house.
The fact that the victim of a crime has dementia shouldn't necessarily indicate to you that that person cannot be a witness and an important witness in their own case. Do you want to continue to own your house until you die?
When I die, my people divide my house.
These are the kinds of cases that are nuanced. They typically involve very complex family dynamics that have taken decades to evolve and are only getting worse as time progresses. So if there's history with that family, Adult Protective Services will be able to provide that to you while you're in the field. And that situation that's in front of you that you're looking at is going to look really different through the lens of all of that information than it does when you're just standing on the porch with someone trying to figure out whose paperwork is more legitimate than whose.
At the end of the jury trial, Ms. Remmert was convicted of multiple felonies, and the trial judge sentenced her to 7 years and 4 months in the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The cash that had been seized from the home was released back to the victim, and the judge signed an order voiding the deed and returning Ms. King's home to its rightful owner.
Well, I have to say it's nice to see a good result in a case like that. And I'm wondering, Jamie, maybe you can talk to this, if there are some red flags in the dealings between, I guess, the niece and the aunt there that we can sort of highlight and pull out for people to be aware of and to look at in other cases where they might be concerned that a family member is taking advantage of a senior citizen.
Yes. So definitely, I think the isolation of the family member, the inability for anybody to talk to that family member, to ask questions, the inability for family to go in and inspect the living conditions or have access to the property, the changing of the locks, all of those things. And then the fast actions of the bank as well. So, but definitely, I think that there was a couple good takeaways, and the main one being the isolation of the victim.
That's good to know. Whoops, I muted myself. Good to know and good for people to look out for. We're going to move on. We've got some more slides to get through, and hopefully we can get through everything before 11 here. So, of course, elder abuse can take many forms, and oftentimes we just want to take a minute to note that Uh, these forms can take place together or more than one type at the same time. And that could include, for example, a family member or a caretaker who abuses a senior or withholds care of some kind in order to get that person to cooperate with the demand for money, or to get that person to, sign a power of attorney or provide access to a bank account or something of that nature. And we know that all of this type of abuse can have very real complications for our older folks. Uh, and these are terrible consequences for these people, but they also impact investigations. And so you may see a reluctance to end the abuse due to certain ties to the abuser, whether it's a personal friend or a family member or someone that they've developed a romantic attachment to. You may see a fear of retaliation from the abuser, particularly where that person has direct access in the form, when they have a family member or a caregiver who's in the home. Uh, Victims of this abuse certainly experience feelings of shame for falling victim to these sorts of scams. You may see cases where the victim has a dependency on the abuser for their assistance. Again, when dealing particularly with family or caregivers. And of course, this abuse causes physical and emotional suffering and other losses in the form of money, property, time, self-esteem, and your ability to provide for oneself. So if you are a friend or a relative or a caregiver, an advocate, and you're looking out for signs of financial abuse, what should you look for? And here we have a few things to be on the lookout for, and that can include things like unpaid bills. If somebody hasn't paid their utility bills or something basic like that for the first time in years, that could be a sign that either this person is falling victim to a scam and has transferred money away, or someone has gotten access to a bank account that was used for automatic payments and siphon that money away. You might see a large amount of junk mail where someone has responded to scams through the mail, and they've been added to that mailing list, and their volume is increasing. Other signs where you see large bank withdrawals or unusual credit card activity. Situations where a caregiver or family isn't providing care or appropriate levels of care, missing medication. Behavioral changes, changes in personality or demeanor, or the level of hygiene or their ability to provide self-care. Missing valuable property, unusual new friends or names on accounts, and a phone that rings constantly from people that were otherwise strangers or you may not know. And other signs to watch out for: unusual or unexplained changes in a will or beneficiaries to a will. Social isolation, that's something that we highlighted in that video, where the older person is sort of locked away from friends and family, and the abuser is demanding to speak on their behalf and limiting access. Calls from debt collectors where there shouldn't be a debt that you know about. Strange charges on a medical bill or a home in a state of disrepair. Jamie, are there any of those particular signs that you want to touch on? Sort of, I guess, signs of abuse or red flags that people should really be aware of.
Well, for financial abuse, I know I keep kind of repeating myself when it comes to the difficulty of these investigations because they are so hard, but the changing of the beneficiaries and the wills, because you do have caregivers, and when one of our seniors is going through dementia or Alzheimer's, that is going to be common to have caregivers that are beneficiaries. And then you may have siblings that are arguing and they're changing those. So it can be very difficult, but having, to the best of your ability, if there can be somebody to monitor that situation when you have an elder or a senior going through those changes, it's helpful. But definitely, I would think the debt collectors, and if you know that your relative or your senior or your elder is supposed to have, they have money and they have funds, and even if it's state's assistance, those bills should be paid for. So I think that's a big one.
I think those are good points. And I also see that we have a question in the chat box, and it has to do a little bit with the video that we just watched where there was a trial and the judge at the end of the trial was able to invalidate a deed that the caregiver, the niece in that case, had sort of fraudulently convinced the victim of the crime to sign. And the question is whether criminal prosecution is the only approach to invalidating a deed that the senior reports was wrongfully conveyed, or when they say they did not realize what they were signing. And they make the point that many seniors are reluctant to pursue criminal actions against their family members. I think that's a very common complication in some of these cases where the victim may not necessarily want to see their niece or nephew or someone else suffer criminal consequences for their actions. But I guess I can also say, certainly criminal prosecution is not the only way to do that. Being with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, the criminal side is our specialty, and that's certainly what we would look at. Otherwise, we would refer you to either a civil attorney or to in Guam. I think one of our later slides is we have, and I'm gonna botch the name of it. I can't remember if it's the Elder Justice Center. Let me see if I can skip ahead and find that. I think that's what it's called. Yes, the Elder Justice Center, and I'm sure there are some other presentations tomorrow and later next month that are going to talk a little bit more about the local resources available for that. But certainly, if you are dealing with a situation where you have a senior who says, I didn't mean to sign that, or I didn't know what that was, criminal prosecution is not the only answer. They can definitely pursue civil relief in court with either a private attorney or through looking to a resource like the Elder Justice Center. So I hope that answers that question. And if there are any follow-ups, please feel free to put those in the chat box. So we talked a little bit about financial abuse by members of the family. And here we've got a short video that's going to illustrate financial abuse by a stranger.
One day, my uncle called me and he said he needed some money, some bonds. So, without question, it's his. I gave it to him, and it was a significant amount of money. And 3 weeks later, he called me up and he said he needed more. And I go, "What are you using this for?"
Misty McKinley found Roger Waller, we think, at a gas station. We think she simply saw an easy target. She asked him for a small amount of money. He gave it to her. Somehow she found out where Mr. Waller lives, and she proceeded to go to his home, and she would ask him for money. She would ask him for rides.
Misty McKinley was the type of person that she preyed on people like that. She looked for opportunity, people that she could manipulate and take advantage of.
On a few occasions, Misty McKinley had Mr. Waller drive her to the gas station, and when they got there, she'd have him fill up her boyfriend's car with gas. And that made Mr. Waller very uncomfortable, but he didn't know how to say no.
She would come around, she would knock on the door, and after my insistence of him not answering the door, she started to knock on the windows. When she would show up here bugging you, what did that feel like to you? when she was knocking on the windows.
She knocked on the window here.
Yeah. How'd that make you feel?
I didn't like that at all.
His train of thought was, if I just give her what she wants, she'll go away. Well, we obviously know that that's not the greatest idea. So I put a surveillance camera up so I could see when she was coming, what times of day she was coming. I could see 2 a.m. I could see 4 a.m. One day she had walked around the house for an hour, knocking on windows and doors.
What are you doing here?
Mr. Waller told her he didn't want her to come to his home anymore. He felt intimidated. He was starting to feel scared because she simply wouldn't stay away.
I noticed he became quieter. He just seemed way more reserved than normal, lost weight.
Mr. Waller's family actually caught her in the act of coming over and knocking on his door. Despite numerous requests to stay away from the home, she kept coming back. So they got a restraining order.
She knew she was taking from somebody who didn't have anything to give her and kept coming back and back and back and back and would not go away.
The first time Misty was charged, she was charged with a couple counts of violating the harassment restraining order.
She was caught once. She went to court once, pled guilty once, and they let her go. And when they were supposed to bring her back for sentencing, she never showed up.
It was really difficult because she would come at all hours of the day, and then she was gone so quickly. And so it took a long time before we were ultimately able to take her into custody.
As we were building evidence for the case, specifically looking at the financial exploitation, it ultimately came down to evidence and what we could prove in court.
In this case, because it was small amounts of cash over a long period of time with really no record kept, we just didn't have enough evidence to establish the amount necessary for a felony level financial exploitation case. The most serious offense that we had was a stalking offense, and so that's the one I charged. I will say that as part of her sentencing, it was important that she be required to pay back some of the money. I was happy with the outcome of the case. She was terrorizing him. At one point, he told the investigator that he felt like a prisoner in his own home, and stopping that was really our number one priority.
How are you feeling now that she is no longer...
Well, I feel good about it.
You feel good? You feeling a little bit more like yourself?
Yeah.
When you walk through this neighborhood, they know who Roger Waller is. He's known in his community. And for somebody to be known in their community, loved in their community, to be taken advantage in their community, to be made to feel like they're not safe is not okay.
So I think that gives us a pretty good example of another way that elder justice abuse occurs, particularly when dealing with people who are strangers to you. Jamie, our next slide talks a little bit about why seniors are targeted. Is that something you could offer some thoughts on? Like, why is it that these scams and these scammers are going after senior citizens in particular versus maybe other members of the community?
I think it comes down to our seniors not having the access to resources like maybe all of us have. They are homebound in most situations. They aren't exposed to the latest trends. They don't receive the constant information that we the younger generation receive. So, and then also they have worked their whole lives and they have a lot of money they have like it says there, a large nest egg. You know, they want to go after the money, and an 18-year-old doesn't have the money. So I don't giggle about that lightly. It is I giggle about the fact that an 18-year-old doesn't have money. Not that our seniors are.
The only time it's good to not have money is when the scammers are looking for you.
Yes.
So like you said, we've got a few other things on this slide that sort of talk about why seniors are targeted. They may pose less risks to criminals, because they have less recourse, and they are often homebound, as you said, and so they're more easily accessible, and maybe more trusting in some cases. We are running a little bit short on time. I think we're supposed to wrap up by 11. And I do want to save a little time for questions. This next section, I'm just going to skip through pretty quickly, and it deals with statistics about elder abuse. And we know it's a serious problem. Probably most of the people listening here know someone or have heard of someone who has been a victim of this kind of abuse or a scam like this. But these statistics are just here to sort of illustrate the scale of the problem, not globally, but nationally. And so we can look at a couple of them. It says over 13% of older victims are a victim of fraud every year. And it's a growing problem in part because the senior population itself is increasing over time. Here's a statistic from 2018 that says the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center received over 60,000 complaints from victims over the age of 60, and just the reported losses were in excess of $649 million. And that's just the reported crimes. So many of these go unreported. The scale of the problem is even larger than that.
Hey, Ben, real fast, I'm going to interrupt.
Sure.
Here, there's a couple questions that have come in. One question is, could you prosecute without the victim's approval? So when we're talking through some of these cases, is it possible to prosecute without victim's approval?
It is certainly possible. It is more difficult. Oftentimes, the victim is a crucial and necessary witness. And if they're unwilling to participate or unwilling to testify, it can certainly complicate things, and in some cases may prevent prosecution. But it is certainly possible, particularly in cases where it's a document-heavy prosecution. It may be a situation where, well, I was going to say a bank fraud situation where someone got access to a bank account, but you would still have to establish that it was without the consent of the owner of the bank account. So I talked a lot there, but the short answer is yes, it's possible, but it is certainly much more difficult.
It is difficult. And if I may, Ben, also the capacity of the person would also come into play. So that is also the uniqueness to that situation, is the senior's mental capacity at the time or cognitive capacity at the time that whatever the crime is that we would have to also battle.
I think that's a good point, and that ties into some of the later slides that we have here. I'm going to skip through the statistics because I'm not sure we need to focus on that right now. More importantly is what can you do to help prevent these sorts of losses? And some of this is sort of common sense. Safeguard your financial information and your personal information. Something you might not think about is ordering a credit report to make sure there aren't any new unexplained credit lines or credit cards or loans in an individual's name. Use safe computer practices, and always be willing to hang up the phone. I think this tags on to the previous slide pretty well. These are some things, Jamie, that I thought maybe you might want to talk about here. We've got some red flags for people who may have concerns about someone they know. These are some things that they should look out for.
Yes. I mean, this slide is pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to get out there. I know throughout the presentation we have talked about red flags, but this is good not only for us in our day-to-day lives as family members, but also as investigators when or mandatory reporters, or if somebody's calling in to say, I think something's going on. If any of these items come up, where they're taking out large amount of monies and they're continually saying, especially if you have a cognitive incapacitated person or a person that's going through dementia, if they say, oh, well, it's your niece's birthday, or it's the niece's birthday, it's the niece's birthday, and you've heard this 5 or 6 times or even 2 times, and they're taking out money for the same event over and over again, then that could be a red flag. Just a lot of the things that we've already talked about, but because we've talked about a lot of these red flags along the way, but just wanted to toss that slide in there for that purpose.
Sure, and maybe the next couple, if you want to take a look at these and identify anything that people should look out for in particular, we're looking at now some tips for advocates and investigators and people who are dealing closely with senior citizens and maybe investigating these sorts of cases.
Yes. So when it comes to questioning, and even when you are, if you have a family member that brings in a senior that says, we think there's some things going on, that process is going to be slower than it would for another victim of a crime, because they may not know they're a victim, but they're also, we're dealing with a senior part of our population. So you would want, these are some of the tips when it comes to asking questions specific to the senior is, are you worried about your money? Are you worried about your care? And how so? And take it slow. Things to be aware of during your interviewing or while you're asking these questions are, like they talked about before, time of day. If they have some sort of medical condition that you're going to want to provide food during the conversation, or water, or taking frequent breaks. Hearing loss, you may experience that as an obstacle also. But just things to think about when you are talking with a potential victim, and questions to ask that victim may not be the same as if we were dealing with our younger generation.
I think those are great points. And I think we may have some more tips on the next slide that really talk about how and why these cases can be complex, and some of the roadblocks that might come up in the forms of, defenses that perpetrators offer. Is there anything there that you want to highlight?
Yes, on the right-hand column where it says common but false defenses, is that not always because there's a power of attorney in place is that a defense. Not always is it going to be a civil matter. And I think we saw that in some of the previous cases. And then also when we were talking about prosecuting someone, the poor cognition of the person or the mental capacity of the person is not always going to be a defense. Well, they have dementia or they have Alzheimer's. That doesn't mean we can't prosecute. It may add another layer, but it's not an automatic defense. So you may hear from a suspect that they have power of attorney, or the victim has dementia. That way they're really not a victim. This is what they really wanted, so on and so forth. But just remember that it's cumulative facts. So totality of the circumstances that make up a case, not just one or two things. It's a lot of things that are going to make up that case. And when it comes to investigating these cases, I mean, we all know, like it's been brought up before, they don't want to prosecute family members, especially criminally. They don't want to go through that. There is a high level of embarrassment that's going on. And I think a big one is the fear of removal from their home. I think that all of us that have had seniors in our family, they don't want to leave their home, and they're scared that if they're a victim of something, that they're going to be deemed incompetent of staying home and they're going to be removed from their house. So you're dealing with a lot of different levels of concern from that victim.
I think those are great points to touch on. And we're going to move ahead a little bit. We've tried to provide a lot of information so that we can prevent older folks from becoming victims of these scams. And we also want to encourage people to be willing to get involved and, be proactive in some ways. And so there's a few things here that we encourage people to do, and that is, if you are in a situation where something has already happened, you can put a stop payment on money wires and checks. If you're receiving harassing phone calls, you can change your phone number. You can freeze credit in order to prevent the opening of new credit cards or new loan accounts. And certainly we want to encourage people to make reports where you do have knowledge that something has happened or you suspect something has happened. Please reach out and report that. The earlier you can, the better in terms of trying to investigate those claims and also to sort of limit the damage in a way, or stop the losses. So things you can do is call law enforcement and make a report. You can get you could seek a civil restraining order in cases where you have somebody engaging in harassing conduct in person. Certainly report to Adult Protective Services, and as we've said, call the FBI office, use the IC3 Internet Complaint Center. And we're running out of time a little bit. I think we've covered that pretty well. I do have one last thing here, and it's sort of a pop quiz, and if maybe we have just a minute to look at it. This is something that actually pops up here in Guam. So if you are on the computer and you're on social media and you see a post like this, that says, "My name is so-and-so," and we've blocked that out. "I'm from Guam, living and working in Togo, and I wish to donate a fairly large sum of money to a compatriot living in Guam. I've been in critical condition at the hospital. I don't know if I'll be able to find my country again before I leave this earth. I don't have an heir, and I don't want all my money to go to the public treasury in Togo. I want to send this money to compatriots in my country. And that may be surprising to you, but it's the result of a long period of reflection. I hope to be able to read you again, if of course you wish to benefit from this donation." So I guess the pop quiz is something like this suspicious? Why? And if so, why? Should you contact this person? What do you think might happen? We probably don't have time to go through your answers. So Jamie, I'm going to ask you, what do you think?
So I'm sorry, Ben, I would love to answer that, but I was reading the questions from our group when you were reading that.
Okay. Well, maybe those are probably more important. So the answer is yes. Of course, this is suspicious. You've got somebody who wants to send you a lot of money for no particular reason. It's very likely that this is sort of a scam where they're going to claim, sure, I've got all this money that I want to send you, but first you need to pay the Togolese taxes, or first we have to pay the Togolese attorney in order to get that money sent over to Guam. And so no, this is not somebody that you should reach out to or send money to, or turn over your personal information to. But let's move from there to the questions in the chat. I think it's more valuable to take a look at those. What do we got?
Absolutely. So we'll start with one that came in. The first one that came in, it says banks should be trained to recognize possible financial exploitation. I agree with that. Banks here on Guam, I think that there's room for some more education for the banks. So therefore, I'm hopeful that we can get out to the banks. This has spurred a lot of communication and discussions around the bank's activities and what the banks know they can do or can't do. And there are laws out there that give the banks more power when it comes to reporting and stopping funds. For instance, there are laws on the books where they can stop financial transactions up to 10 days to give law enforcement a chance to investigate whether or not this is a legitimate transaction or if there is some fraud going on there. So I appreciate that point. I'm glad to hear it from somebody else that the banks need some additional training and education on this. And hopefully we can take that away from here and work on that. There was another question, and oh wait, let's go up just a touch here. It says, oh dang it.
I do see a question that says, have there been any cases prosecuted federally on Guam and or the CNMI regarding elder abuse? And I can say certainly there have been cases federally prosecuted. You may not see, there's no federal charge called elder abuse, but there are certainly cases that have to do with violations of federal law where the victims are senior citizens that really would fall right within the scope of this presentation. It is something that has happened here and continues to happen here.
Another question, how can we help an elderly individual who has severe trust issues, thus family members unable to maintain caregivers? So if I'm hearing that correctly, is the problem getting a caregiver for the elderly individual? if that is the case, I definitely think APS is somebody that can help, and they have got other resources. We don't, as a criminal entity, we don't have or investigative entity, we don't have the capabilities of helping with the caregiving side. Is that correct, Ben? I mean, is that how you
Yeah.
interpret that question? Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Does elderly
Otherwise,
abuse, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
no, go ahead.
I hope I answered that question. I was going on to the next question.
Oh, sure. I didn't know we had more. That's great.
Oh yeah, we have more. Who can assist the physically okay, no, okay, we already did that one. And then, does elderly abuse come under domestic violence laws? It can. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ben, you go
certainly
first.
can. I mean, that would, certainly physical abuse in particular is certainly another form of elder abuse, and absolutely is when you have household members in particular that could fall within domestic violence laws. That would be a state or local issue, and while you could certainly call us to deal with it, it is something we would refer probably to local law enforcement or the Office of the Attorney General to prosecute something like that.
I think it's important to note that, especially in this situation, we're talking about federal law that was enacted in 2017 that's specific to 60 and older. It does not negate other laws that are in place for all ages. It's just an additional amplifier, and it is something additional that we can charge for people that are going through some specific situations like this that are above age 60. Does that make sense? So you could still have wire fraud, but then it may be wire fraud with an enhancement of elder abuse, right? Is that correct, Ben, with the new enactment of 2017?
Right. That just sort of brings it into the scope of existing criminal laws. We do have a couple of additional slides, but I think this has to do with some local resources in Guam and the CNMI. That's the Aging Center and the Monamco Center in Saipan. And of course, the Division of Senior Citizens here in Guam. I think there will be additional presentations that will talk about these local resources in much more detail. So really, I think we've gotten through the presentation. There's our contact information. If people have additional questions, after this, feel free to give us a call. I know this presentation is going to be made available. We had to skip through some slides, but if you want to go back through and take a look, please do so. Otherwise, we'd be more than happy to take any additional questions that might be out there.
We have another. So there was a question that was posed regarding some sophisticated techniques. Does it ever get to the point of having to wiretap the house? That would be an investigative technique, a sophisticated investigative technique. I would say to that I mean, nothing's off the table when it comes to investigating cases. And if we have a scenario or a situation that rises to the level of using a sophisticated technique like a wiretap, it's not off the table. I think that is obviously one of the most intrusive techniques that can be used in any investigation. So it would have to be a very severe, high level investigation that would call for that type of technique to be used.
I think that's a great answer. I don't have anything to add.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thanks, Ben. That was great.
Hey, thank you too, Jamie. That was terrific. And thank you, Cynthia, for setting this up, and to the Guam Coalition. We always appreciate the opportunity to reach out and get this information out into the community.
And all the people that hung in with us today for the last 2 hours. Thanks for hanging in there.
There are quite a number who are still on. And so if we may be ending the audiovisual part of it, but feel free to still continue with your comments in the Q&A. So I know Jamie and Ben will be keeping an eye on that. So if there's anything else that you'd like for any comments, we can post that in the Q&A. But certainly because of time constraints, we want to thank you so much, Ben and Jamie, for joining us. And I know Evelyn with Evelyn Manibusan and the team from Public Health and Social Services with the Division of Senior Citizens and the Bureau of Adult Protective Services were also in the house responding to some of the questions or maybe even asking questions. And then we also did have folks who run our Elder Justice Center also present, as well as with our Office of the Public Guardian also in the house. So certainly we will have their time also. Tomorrow we have Tony Malia Ramirez with the Department of Parks and Recreation. Sorry, I'm stumbling over that. He'll be joining us addressing the care to elders from a cultural perspective. And then next week on the 2nd and 3rd Guam time, we will be having Adult Protective Services reviewing more on local reporting. And then we will have information next week, Thursday, again, on more on the Elder Justice Center. So we're just so excited that they could join us and provide information to that, as well as information from the Office of Public Guardian. So thank you to the U.S. Attorney's Office, to our special agent from FBI, to the Department of Public Health and Social Services for standing by. And to those we will be seeing more tomorrow and next week, thanks again. And thanks to all of you for joining us. We appreciate ASL interpreter. There's Alyssa there. kNOw was there a moment ago. And then we also have our caption tech supporting us as well. So thank you, folks. And we appreciate you all. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.